Welcome to the First Church in Chestnut Hill. It is our custom on Christmas Eve to have a story, a Christmas story, and this year the story is called The Little King. In the time of Emperor Augustus of Rome, a star was seen rising in the night sky. Some looked on the star without interest, not knowing what it meant. But there were wise ones who knew something important was about to happen, something very special. A new king was to be born. 3 of these men, said to be as wise as kings, decided to head west from Persia to follow that star. They were named Melchior, Balthazar, and Caspar. And these 3 wise men were not alone. With them traveled a young boy, Caspar's son. The boy's name was Caius. He was an intelligent child, a true son of a wise man. But Caius also thought he was very smart. He thought that he knew everything there was to know, as some young people manage to think from time to time. And already possessing everything he needed to know inside his mind, Caius was not very patient with anyone who sought to teach him new things. His father Caspar was also his teacher, and fortunately, Caspar was very patient. Caspar knew his son was smart, but he also thought that Caius needed to gain a little wisdom to go along with all that intelligence. And a long trip might be one way to find some of that wisdom. So Caspar announced that he was heading west on a journey. Caius shrugged, not caring one way or another. Then Caspar added that Caius would be traveling west as well. Caius did more than shrug that time. He cried out, "That's not fair! Why do I have to go on some long trip through the desert? I want to stay here with my friends." Caspar said, "No, this is an important trip to see an important person. I want you to come with me." Caius continued to argue, "But I hate sand and there'll be nowhere to swim in the river. Why can't I just stay here and do what I want?" Caspar responded firmly, "No, you will travel with us to the west. Now go and get your things ready. We leave in the morning." Caspar mentioned that they would be following the star to the place that they needed to go. He explained all of that to Caius, who thought it was a rather silly idea. The sky was full of stars. How and why would you follow any one of them? Caius grumbled to himself, "Stupid trip, stupid star, sitting on a camel for miles and miles. Camels stink." That morning, Caspar and his son met the other men, and the group headed west. They traveled along the great Tigris and Euphrates rivers. After a while, Caius asked, "Can I go swim in the river?" Caspar said, "No, you cannot. We have a long way yet to travel." Caius folded his arms and sulked on his camel. The caravan entered into the desert. They traveled at night and made camp by day. Hot sand and wind lashed at their tents. Caius asked his father, "Can we go home? This place is hot and sandy and terrible." Caspar responded, "No, we are not going home. We still have a long way to travel." Caius grumbled and pulled a sandy blanket over his head. After a long journey, the little group arrived in the city of Jerusalem. Melchior, Balthazar, and Caspar began to ask around the city looking for the new king. "Where is the child born, the King of the Jews? We have observed his star at its rising and have come to pay him homage." Eventually, some soldiers came to them, soldiers from the palace. Caius thought, "At last we will get to see this king." The wise men were not as sure. They traveled to see King Herod, who was the king of Judea under the Romans. Herod asked the wise men, "I am interested in meeting this new king in my lands. Tell me about that star you have followed." The 3 wise men did not wish to tell Herod about the star. They realized that Herod might not wish for there to be another king in the land, so they remained silent. Caius, however, did not remain silent. He did not understand why everyone was so reluctant to talk about the star after they had traveled halfway around the world to this palace. They came to see a king, and here was a king right in front of them. Caius was also upset with his father for having dragged him along. "My father is just being forgetful. He explained it all to me. Kaya told what he knew about the star to Herod and to the chief priests and to the scribes, all assembled there. Herod said, "Thank you, young man. You have been very wise. Please, the four of you, go and search diligently for the child. And when you have found him, bring me word so that I may also go and pay him homage. I will reward you handsomely when you return." Kaya was pleased with being called wise, and especially with the possibility of a reward. His father, on the other hand, was quite upset. They left the palace and traveled out of the city. Kaya did not understand where they were going. This was the only city around. How could a king not be in the city? They went out into the country to a small town called Bethlehem. Why would the king be there? The three men said the star that they had been following had stopped there. Kaya thought, how does a star stop? They just sit up there in the sky. His father and the others were filled with joy and grew excited as they traveled closer and closer to a house outside of this town. Kaya was not impressed. He liked being in the fancy palace with the king who had called him wise. They came to the house with a stable out back. Kaya thought, that's no palace. On entering, Kaya saw a young woman and an older man next to a newborn baby. Melchior, Balthasar, and his father Caspar knelt before the baby. They opened great chests and took out expensive gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Kaya had no idea what frankincense and myrrh were, but he knew that gold was important. Why would a baby need all of this? Kaya walked forward and he looked down at the child. He saw two dark eyes wide open. Kaya looked deeply into those eyes, and they seemed to go on forever and ever. Kaya thought he could see all of the joy in the world in those eyes. As he looked, he could feel love grow all around him like the waters of a river or the warmth of the sun. Kaya knelt down next to his father to be a little closer to this wondrous child. After a while, the four visitors camped outside under the guiding star. As they lay there, Kaya had a dream. A man dressed all in white told him that they should not go back to see Herod, who planned to harm this child. Kaya could not imagine someone wanting to hurt the baby, but then he remembered how eager Herod was to find this new king. Kaya was ashamed that his anger could have possibly hurt someone so innocent and so small. He woke up and spoke to his father and the others. He explained to them about the dream and the man in white. Kaya said, "We can't go back to the city to see that bad king Herod." Caspar was happy at these words and was very proud of his son. "Kaya, I think maybe you have grown a little wise on our journey." And Kaya was very happy to hear his father's words. They all discussed what to do next and decided to return to Persia another way so as not to give away the family's location. On the way back home, Kaya did not complain as they traveled through the hot desert. He did not ask to swim in the great river. He did not even want to go to the great palace in Persia upon their return. Kaya could not help but remember the dark eyes he had seen in Bethlehem. He could not help but think of the eyes of the little king. So ends our story. Merry Christmas.